There is a question so simple that a child can ask it before bed, and so deep that after 2,500 years, the smartest people who have ever lived still cannot answer it. And I want to be careful here, because this is not the question you think it is. This is not, how did the universe begin? We have theories for that. Beautiful ones, actually. This is something underneath that. Something the beginning of the universe doesn't even touch. Why is there anything at all? Sit with that for just a second, because it slides right off the mind the first time you hear it. There didn't have to be a universe. Think about what that sentence actually means. No stars, no galaxies, no atoms, no space for the atoms to sit in, no time for anything to happen in. The simplest possible reality, the one that would need no cause, no beginning, no explanation, no maintenance, is nothing. Pure, absolute nothing. And I don't mean an empty black room, because a black room is still something. It has walls. It has darkness. And darkness is a thing that exists. I mean the absence of the room. The absence of the darkness. The absence of absence. That nothing would have been effortless. It would have been stable. It would have been eternal. Nothing breaks. Nothing needs a mechanism to keep it going. It is, by a very long way, the most natural state for reality to be in. And yet, here you are, made of atoms that were forged in the cores of dying stars, sitting on a rock that is falling endlessly around one ordinary sun, which is one of maybe a few 100 billion suns in this galaxy, in a universe that holds, and this number should frighten you a little, as many as 2 trillion galaxies. Something, rather than nothing. For almost all of human history, this question belonged to 2 kinds of people, and 2 kinds only: priests and philosophers. Everyone else was told, gently, to stop asking. And then, just a few decades ago, something genuinely strange happened. Physicists, people with equations, people with telescopes, started walking up to this ancient, sacred, roped-off question and saying, actually, we've got this. We can answer it. The universe could have come from nothing. Maybe it even had to. And here's the thing I have to warn you about before we go any further, because I think you deserve to know what you're walking into. This video does not have a comforting ending. I'm not saying that to be dramatic, and I'm not saying it to keep you watching. I'm saying it because it's true, and because the closer I looked at this, the more I realized that the trouble isn't that we don't have an answer. The trouble is worse than that. The trouble is that at the bottom of this question, there is a kind of trap. And the trap swallows every answer you throw into it. It swallows the Big Bang. It swallows the multiverse. It swallows God. It even swallows the idea that there is an answer at all. Every floor you think you've reached turns out to have a trapdoor in it. So, let me show you the trap. Let me show you the floor, and then let me show you the trapdoor underneath it. And then the one under that. Bear with me. This is going to get strange. Now, I am not a physicist. I need to say that clearly and early, because everything I'm about to tell you, I learned the way you're about to learn it. By reading obsessively, going down a rabbit hole at 2 a.m, and coming out the other side with my sense of reality slightly rearranged. And the book that pushed me over the edge is fresh. It came out in May of 2025 from the University of Chicago Press, and it's called Battle of the Big Bang.
The subtitle is The New Tales of Our Cosmic Origins. And I want you to hold on to that word, tales, because the book is honest in a way that most science books are too proud to be. It's written by two people.
One is Niayesh Afshordi, who is a real working cosmologist, a professor at the University of Waterloo and the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics, which is one of the serious places on Earth where people think about this for a living. The other is Phil Halper, a science communicator who, and this is the part I love, has spent years actually sitting down and interviewing the cosmologists at the center of these debates for a series he made called Before the Big Bang. He talked to Roger Penrose. He talked to Alan Guth. He even got to Stephen Hawking. So this is not one person guessing from the outside. This is someone who went and asked the people who built the theories to their faces what they actually think. And the book landed. Smithsonian named it one of the 10 best science books of 2025. Carlo Rovelli, the physicist who wrote those gorgeous little books about time, called it an intellectual feast. Sabina Hassenfelder called it a must-read.
Penrose himself called it broad and open-minded.
When Rovelli, Hassenfelder, and Penrose all nod at the same book, you pay attention. But here's why I actually reached for it, and why it's the perfect map for where we're going. Most books about the beginning of the universe give you one answer. This book does the opposite. It walks you through a whole zoo of rival answers, bouncing universes, cyclic universes, universes that loop back on themselves in time, universes born inside black holes, universes budding off of other universes forever, holograms, string landscapes. And it does not tell you which one is right. Because nobody knows which one is right. What it gives you instead is the fight. The actual, real, sometimes bitter argument between brilliant people who cannot agree. And I paired it in my own head with an older book, a 2012 book by a writer named Jim Holt called Why Does the World Exist? Holt isn't a scientist. He's a philosopher and a journalist, and he treats this whole question like a detective story. He goes around interviewing physicists and philosophers, one after another, like a man trying to solve a murder where the victim is nothingness itself. And I'll be honest with you, Holt never solves it. But watching him fail, carefully and beautifully, taught me more than most books that pretend to succeed. So that's the equipment we're taking down into the cave. A physicist's map of the battlefield and a detective's notebook. Let's go find the first floor. Here's the floor almost everyone starts on. The Big Bang. 13.8 billion years ago, everything that exists was compressed into a single, unimaginably hot, unimaginably dense point. And then it expanded. And it's been expanding ever since. And that's the beginning. That's it. That's the answer. Ask a reasonably educated person where everything came from, and this is what they'll tell you. And they'll feel pretty good about it. And I don't want to be unkind about that, because it's a genuinely magnificent theory, and it's supported by real evidence. The leftover heat of that early universe is still washing over us right now, a faint glow in every direction of the sky. That part is not in doubt. So it feels like solid ground. It feels like the bottom. But watch what happens the moment you ask the obvious follow-up. The question every child asks and every adult pretends is silly. What happened before the Big Bang? And here's where it gets strange. Because the honest answer, the answer that a surprising number of physicists will give you, is that the question might be broken. Not hard, broken, meaningless. Like asking,
What's north of the North Pole?
And what really got me is that a Christian bishop figured this out about 1600 years ago without a single equation. Around the year 400, Augustine of Hippo was wrestling with exactly this. People kept taunting him. If your God created the world, what was he doing before he created it? And Augustine's answer was extraordinary for its time. He said the question assumes there was a before. But time itself is part of creation. Time began when the world began. So there is no before the beginning, because before is a word that only means something once time already exists. Ask what happened before time, and you've made a sentence that looks grammatical, but points at nothing. Sit with how radical that is. A man in the 4th century, working with nothing but relentless thought, arrived at an idea that modern physics would take 1500 years to reach with general relativity. The idea that time is not the stage the universe performs on. Time is part of the performance. The past may not go back forever. The past may have an edge. And I want you to feel how alien that is. Because we don't feel it. Every instinct you have says time is an infinite line stretching back behind you, and you can always take one more step backward. But imagine walking backward through history. The pyramids, the dinosaurs, the first cells, the first stars. And then you take one more step back, and there is no floor. Not darkness, not emptiness. The step itself becomes meaningless. There is no back to go to. That's not a place. That's the edge of the concept of place. Hold on to that feeling. The edge of the past. Because we're about to find out that the edge might not be the end of the story after all. Because here's the twist. And this is where Battle of the Big Bang really opens up. Just because Augustine was right that the question before the beginning might be broken, doesn't mean there wasn't a before. Whoa. Let me say that more carefully, because it sounds like a contradiction, and it isn't.
General relativity, taken at face value, does point back to that single dense point, that singularity, where the equations stop working. Everything goes to infinity. Infinite density, infinite temperature, and infinity in physics is almost always a giant flashing sign that says, "Your theory has broken down here. You are missing something." And so for the last few decades, cosmologists have been asking a wild question. What if the Big Bang wasn't the beginning? What if it was just a transition? A door, not a wall? And this is where the zoo comes out. Let me walk you through it, because it is genuinely one of the strangest neighborhoods in all of human thought. There are the bouncing universes. In these models, our universe had a previous phase. It was contracting, smaller and smaller, and then, instead of crashing into a singularity, it bounced. What we call the Big Bang was the bottom of the bounce.
Which means there was a universe before ours, dying as ours was born.
Then there are the cyclic models, where this happens over and over. Expand, contract, bounce. Expand, contract, bounce. A universe that breathes forever. And every bang we see is just one breath. There are models where our entire universe was born inside a black hole in some other, larger universe, which would mean that every black hole in our sky might be pregnant with a universe of its own. Read that again. The black holes we can see might each contain a cosmos. There's eternal inflation, where the rapid expansion that kick-started our universe never fully stops everywhere. It keeps going in a vast background, constantly budding off new bubble universes, ours being just one bubble in an endless foam. And there's Stephen Hawking's idea, the no-boundary proposal, which is so subtle it's almost a poem.
Hawking suggested that if you look back toward the beginning in the right way, using a mathematical trick that blends time and space together, there is no sharp starting point at all. The universe is finite in the past, but has no boundary, no first moment. The way the surface of the Earth is finite, but has no edge you could fall off. Which is why Hawking liked to compare asking what came before the Big Bang to asking what lies north of the North Pole. You can keep walking. There's just nothing more north. Now here's what I need you to notice. Every single one of these is a serious proposal by serious physicists. And they cannot all be true. They flatly contradict each other. The comfortable answer, the Big Bang was the beginning, has dissolved, in front of us, into a dozen rival stories, and not one of them has been proven. The floor we were standing on turned out to be a trapdoor into a room full of other floors, and every one of those floors is also a trapdoor.
Paradoxical, right?
We started trying to find the beginning, and the beginning multiplied. But hang on. If some of these models are cyclic or eternal or bouncing forever, then maybe we've escaped the whole problem. Maybe there was no beginning at all. Maybe the universe, in some form, just always existed. No first moment, no creation, no need for a why. It's just been here, forever, going through its cycles. Case closed. No way, says the mathematics. And this is the part that genuinely stunned me. In 2003, 3 physicists, Arvind Borde, Alan Guth, the same Guth who invented inflation, and Alexander Vilenkin, proved a theorem. It's called the BGV theorem after their initials, and here is roughly what it says. Any universe that has been, on average, expanding throughout its history cannot be eternal into the past. It must have a past boundary, a beginning. Even the eternal inflation models, the ones that seem to go on forever, even they, when you run them backward, hit an edge. Now I have to be careful and honest here, because this is exactly the kind of thing that gets misused. The theorem does not prove that a god lit the fuse. Vilenkin himself has been very clear that what it really shows is that the classical description of space-time breaks down at that boundary. Something else has to take over, some deeper physics we don't have yet. And plenty of physicists argue about what it truly implies, and whether the assumptions always hold. The experts genuinely disagree. That disagreement is real, and I'm not going to paper over it. But feel the pattern. Every time we reach for the escape hatch labeled "It just always existed," the hatch slams shut. Bounce forever, but the bounces can't go back forever. Inflate forever, but not into the infinite past.
The eternal universe, the one that would let us off the hook, keeps getting harder and harder to hold on to. And I want to pause on the man who proved it, Alexander Vilenkin, because his story is one of those details that reminds you, these are human beings. Vilenkin is Ukrainian. As a young man in the Soviet Union, he was blacklisted from physics for political reasons, and had to take work as a night watchman at a zoo. A zookeeper. Guarding animals in the dark, doing physics in his head. And that man went on to prove one of the deepest results we have about whether the universe had a beginning. I find that almost unbearably moving. The origin of everything, worked out by a man who wasn't allowed to be a physicist, keeping company with sleeping animals. So, let's take stock of where we are, because we've climbed down a long way. The comfortable Big Bang beginning dissolved into a zoo. The zoo couldn't save us from a beginning, The mathematics keeps pointing back to some kind of edge.
And so the pressure builds, and it builds, until finally somebody stands up and says the thing that turns this whole story upside down.
Fine, there was a beginning. So let me tell you how you get a universe from nothing. The man who said it loudly and to enormous acclaim was Lawrence Krauss. In 2012, he published a book with a title that is basically a punch to the face of 2,000 years of philosophy. He called it A Universe from Nothing. And his argument, roughly, is this. In modern physics, empty space is not empty. Thanks to quantum mechanics, what looks like a perfect vacuum is actually seething with activity. Particles flickering in and out of existence. Energy borrowed and repaid in impossibly short instants. Empty space, Krauss argued, is unstable. It naturally produces something. And if you take that seriously, then the appearance of a universe is not a miracle that needs a divine spark. It's almost expected. It's what nothing does.
The universe could come from nothing, no God required. And, this was his real point, this is a question for science now, not for theology. The book was a bestseller. It felt to a lot of people like the mystery had finally been cracked by the people with the actual equations. The priests and philosophers could go home. And then a philosopher named David Albert, who, and this matters, is not just a philosopher, but also holds a doctorate in theoretical physics, wrote a review in the New York Times that did something devastating. He didn't rant. He didn't get emotional. He just asked one quiet question. What do you mean by nothing? Because the nothing in Krauss's book, the seething quantum vacuum, the empty space full of flickering particles, is not nothing. It's a quantum vacuum. It has fields in it. It obeys the laws of quantum mechanics. It has properties and behaviors and rules that tell it how to flicker.
And a thing with fields and laws and properties is not the absence of everything. It is a very specific, very structured something. Albert's point, boiled all the way down, was that the physicists had quietly swapped the word. They took nothing, the true absolute absence, and without quite admitting it, replaced it with a kind of something, and then triumphantly explained how you get a universe out of it. And I have to tell you, when I first read Krauss, I was on his side. I was maximally biased in his favor. A universe from nothing, science wins, mystery solved. I wanted that to be true. And then I read Albert's objection, and I sat there for a long time, because I couldn't unsee it. He was right. Not about whether the physics is beautiful, it is. About the word. The nothing had a secret something hiding inside it the whole time. And this, right here, is where I have to confess something to you. This is the moment where the video you thought you were watching turns into a different video. You thought this was a video about the Big Bang, about cosmology, about the beginning of the universe. It isn't. I realize now it never was. Because the real question was never, how did the universe begin? Krauss can answer that, in a sense. You get a universe when a quantum vacuum does what quantum vacuums do. The real question, the one hiding underneath, the one that swallowed his answer whole, is this. Why was there a quantum vacuum? Why were there laws? Why is there any something at all, even the something we call nothing, rather than the true, absolute, blank nothing that needs no explanation? The question is not about the beginning of the universe. The question is whether nothing is even possible, and whether this question can be answered at all.
And look, if you've made it this far with me, if this is the kind of thing that lodges in your brain and keeps you up at night, then honestly,
Subscribing is probably a smart move, because where we're going from here is stranger than anything we've seen so far. This channel only exists because enough people decided they wanted to keep following the trapdoors down. So if this is your kind of rabbit hole, come further. It gets deeper. Because now we have to talk about what happens when you try to explain the laws themselves. Let me give you the vertigo directly, with a thought experiment, because I don't think you can really feel this problem until you try to do it yourself. Right now, wherever you are, I want you to try to imagine nothing. Real nothing. Not a dark room, take away the room. Not empty space, take away the space. Not a void. A void is a place, and there are no places. No time passing, because time is something. No you watching, because a watcher is something. Try to actually picture it. You can't. And here's the beautiful part. Notice how you fail. Notice what you keep doing. You keep sneaking things back in. You imagine a black expanse, and that's space. You imagine a moment of stillness, and that's time. You imagine yourself floating there, observing the emptiness, and that's a mind. Every single time you try to picture nothing, you smuggle in a something, usually a point of view, a place to stand and look from. Human beings appear to be literally incapable of representing absolute nothing to themselves. And that failure is not a small thing. It might be the whole reason the question feels so bottomless. We can't even hold the alternative in our heads. Okay, so Krauss's nothing was really a something. The quantum vacuum and its laws. So the honest next question is, where did those come from? Where did the quantum fields come from? Where did the laws of physics come from that tell the vacuum how to behave? And now you feel the floor start to tilt. Because whatever you answer, I can just ask it again. Say the laws came from some deeper theory. Fine. Where did the deeper theory come from? Say our whole universe butted off a multiverse. Fine. Where did the multiverse come from? What are the rules the multiverse follows? And who wrote those? This is the oldest trap in philosophy, and it has a wonderfully silly name. Turtles all the way down. There's a story, probably invented but perfect, of a scientist explaining that the Earth floats in space, and an old woman objecting that no, the Earth sits on the back of a giant turtle. And the scientist, being clever, asks, well, what does the turtle stand on? And the woman says, another turtle. And the scientist, thinking he's won, asks what that turtle stands on. And she cuts him off. You're very clever, young man, but it's turtles all the way down. The cause of the cause of the cause of the cause. Picture it visually. Picture yourself falling past explanation after explanation, each one resting on the one below it. And you keep falling, and there is never a bottom turtle. That's one option, an infinite regress, an explanation that never lands. And the only alternative, the only way to stop the fall, is to hit something that just is. Something uncaused. A first turtle that stands on nothing, that needs no explanation, that simply exists by its own nature. Aristotle called it the unmoved mover. Aquinas built a proof of God on it. The philosophers have a version called the principle of sufficient reason, which says everything has an explanation. And Leibniz used it 300 years ago to ask this exact question in these exact words. Why is there something rather than nothing? But do you see the problem? Do you see the beautiful, maddening problem? The whole reason we started falling in the first place was the rule that everything needs a cause.
That rule is what made us reject each answer and demand a deeper one. But the only way to stop falling is to break that exact rule, to declare that one special thing, the first cause, does not need a cause. So either the rule is true and we fall forever with no bottom, or the rule is false, and then, why did we ever trust it? Why demand a cause for the universe if some things get to exist causelessly? Maybe the universe itself is the thing that just is, and we never needed a first hurdle at all. And this is the real fork in the road, the one that has divided serious people for centuries. Because if you do stop at an uncaused first cause, the next question is unavoidable and enormous. What is it? Is it a mindless law? Some brute mathematical necessity? A rule that had no choice but to produce a world? Or is it something with will? Something that, in some sense, we can barely gesture at, chose. I want to give both sides at full strength, because this is where lazy videos cheat, and I don't want to cheat you. Here is the design side, as strong as I can make it. When physicists look at the laws of our universe, they find them to be almost suspiciously fine-tuned. Change the strength of gravity by a hair, change the mass of certain particles by a whisper, change the amount of energy in empty space by a fraction that is smaller than any fraction you've ever imagined, and you don't get a boring universe. You get no universe. No stars, no chemistry, no structure at all. The dials of reality appear to be set, with terrifying precision, exactly where they need to be for a cosmos capable of complexity and eventually life to exist. And the design argument says, dials that precise look set. A first cause that produces a life-permitting universe out of the near infinity of dead ones it could have produced looks less like an accident and more like an intention. And here is the reply, also at full strength, and it is genuinely powerful. It says, of course the dials look set. For us. This is the multiverse plus what's called the anthropic principle, and it goes like this. Suppose there isn't one universe, but countless universes, each with its dials spun to different settings. The overwhelming majority are dead. No stars, no life, nothing to notice they're dead. But in the rare few where the dials happen to land in the life-permitting range, observers arise. And those observers, looking around, will always, necessarily, find themselves in a fine-tuned universe, because they could not exist anywhere else. You are not amazed to find yourself on a planet with breathable air and liquid water. You couldn't have found yourself anywhere else. Same logic, scaled up to the laws themselves. The fine-tuning isn't evidence of design, it's a selection effect. We're the winners of a cosmic lottery with a near infinite number of losing tickets. And winners always find their ticket remarkable. And here's my honest report from the bottom of this fork. Neither side closes it. The design argument is not stupid. The fine-tuning is real and strange. The multiverse reply is not a dodge. The logic is airtight, if the multiverse exists. But notice what the multiverse did. To explain why our something is the way it is, it gave us more something. Vastly more. A near infinity of universes. And every one of those still sits on the same unanswered question we started with. Why is there a multiverse rather than nothing? We didn't escape the trap. We just made it bigger. So maybe, and this is the last floor, and I promise you it has a trapdoor too, maybe the whole question is wrong. This is the position of some very serious thinkers, and I take it seriously. The physicist Sean Carroll argues something like this.
We have this deep habit, this instinct, that everything needs an explanation, a cause, a reason why. And that instinct works beautifully inside the universe. Why is the kettle hot? Because of the flame. Why is the flame there? Because of the gas. Cause, cause, cause. But Carroll's point is that this instinct is a habit we learned from living inside a universe that has causes in it. And there is no law that says the habit must apply to the universe as a whole, taken all at once. Asking why is there a universe might be like asking what the universe smells like. A question built out of real words that, applied to this object, simply doesn't refer to anything. The universe, on this view, is just a brute fact. It exists. There is no why. And your discomfort with that is not a clue about reality. It's just your monkey brain, which evolved to find the causes of rustling bushes, misfiring on a target it was never built to hit. The philosophers David Hume and Bertrand Russell said versions of this too. Russell, famously cornered in a debate, just refused to play. He said, "The universe is there, and that's all. It's a brute fact. Stop asking." And I'll be honest, some days that satisfies me. Some days I think, yes, that's the grown-up answer. The universe just is. Get over it. But then there's Derek Parfit, and Parfit will not let me rest. Parfit was a philosopher who wrote about this question with a kind of quiet, relentless precision that I find almost frightening. And his move was this. He said, fine, maybe there's no cause, but there are still different ways reality could have been. There is the way it actually is, full of galaxies and physics and you. And there is the way it could have been. The null possibility, he called it, where nothing exists at all. And there are countless other ways it could have been. Different laws, different everything. Picture them as a library.
An infinite library, and on every shelf is a book. And each book is one complete possible reality. Over here, a universe with different gravity. Over there, a universe of pure light. Down at the end, a very thin book, almost no pages at all. And that's the null possibility, the reality where nothing exists. Every possible way things could be, sitting on the shelves. Now, one of those books is real. Ours. The rest are just possibilities, unwritten, unrealized. Parfit's question, the one I cannot get out of my head, is, what pulled our book off the shelf? What made one possibility real and left all the others as mere possibilities? He called it the selector. What is the selector? Why this reality and not the empty one, and not any of the others? And you might say, and I want you to say it because I said it, you might say, look, maybe there's just a law, a deep law of reality that says the fullest, richest possible universe must exist.
Or a law that says something must exist rather than nothing. That would explain why the empty book stayed on the shelf. Problem solved. Except, where did that law come from? A law that says something must exist. That law is itself a something. It's a rule. It has content. It could have been different or absent. So now you have to ask, what selected that law? What wrote the rule that reality must be full rather than empty? And who wrote the rule that wrote that rule? Under every floor, a trap door. You explain the universe with a quantum vacuum, and the vacuum needs explaining. You explain the vacuum with a multiverse, and the multiverse needs explaining. You explain the multiverse with a law, and the law needs explaining. You explain it all with a first cause, and the first cause breaks the very rule that made you look for it. You give up and call it a brute fact, and Parfit taps you on the shoulder and asks why this brute fact and not the empty one.
There is no bottom turtle. Or if there is, it is a turtle so strange, so utterly self-explaining, so necessary that its non-existence is impossible, that no human being has ever managed to describe it, or even imagine it, without smuggling in a point of view. So here's where I've ended up, after all of it. After the zoo of universes, and the theorem, and the fight over one small word, and the infinite library, and the trapdoors. I don't have an answer. Neither does Afshordi. Neither does Halper, who interviewed the people who don't have the answer either. Neither did Jim Holt at the end of his detective story. Neither did Krauss, though he thought he did. And neither did Albert, though he saw why Krauss was wrong. The smartest people who have ever lived have stood exactly where we're standing now, and looked down into the same dark, and come back up empty-handed. 2,500 years, and the child's bedtime question is still standing there, undefeated.
But I don't want to leave you with despair, because that's not what I feel. What I feel is something closer to vertigo mixed with awe, and I want to try to give it to you cleanly before we stop. So turn this off in a moment, and when you do, look at your own hand. Really look at it. The lines in the skin, the warmth of it, the fact that it moves when you want it to. That hand is made of atoms that were cooked inside stars that died before the sun was born. It exists, and the reason it exists, rather than not existing, rather than there being nothing at all where your hand is, rather than there being no here, no now, no anything, is a question that no living human being can answer, and possibly no human being ever will.
You are the universe's strangest trick. You are what happens when a temporary pattern of stardust becomes complicated enough to sit up and look around and notice the shelves of the library and realize with a jolt of pure astonishment that there is anything on them at all, rather than nothing. The nothing would have been so much simpler. And yet,